this endeavor to really great heights. So we have Dr. Sahasrabuddheji's session on, and a little bit about Dr. Sahasrabuddheji. Professor Anil Sahasrabuddheji, Professor of Mechanical Engineering at Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Guwahati, is currently serving as the chairman of AICTE. That is also our partners for this FTP IKS. Professor Anil T. Sahasrabuddheji has held several important academic, research and administrative positions at Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, Tata Consultancy Engineers, Northeastern Regional Institute of Science and Technology, Itanagar, IIT Guwahati and College of Engineering, Pune, prior to joining at AICTE as the chairman. As an academician and research in NERIST and IIT Guwahati, and as director COEP, he has taken several initiatives for academic, curricular and co-curricular activities, entrepreneurship, research and good governance. He has been an architect of reforms in technical education at AICTE, which includes mandatory student induction and internship, faculty certification, and Atal faculty development program, creating first ever India's MOOC platform Swayam examination reforms. Oh, I was not aware of this part of you, Dr. Sahasrabuddhe. Innovation movement, series of hackathons, Indian knowledge systems, new funding schemes for supporting students, faculty, and institutions. He's a chairman, Basic Scientific Research Empowered Committee of UGC and Swayam Board. He's a fellow of ISTE, IET, Institution of Engineers, and INAE. He has been bestowed with several awards, which include Maha Entrepreneur Award 2011 of Praj Industries, Jeevan Gaurav Puraskar, Lifetime Achievement Award from MIT World Peace University, Pune in 2019, Mahatma Gandhi Leadership Award from Indian Achievers Forum and CSR Award, Times 2019. He has also been conferred Ravi J. Mathai National Fellow Award by AIMS 2021. So we have our last session of the day by Professor Sahasrabuddheji, which is the imperative of Indian knowledge systems. So we are joined in by teachers from various colleges and universities across India. The upper cap, as prescribed by the UGC HRDC, is 40. We have 41 in this cohort. And we also have many of us watching these sessions on the live stream now, and on the live mode, they can see it later also. Over to you, sir. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Dr. Richa. It was wonderful to be associated with Rashtam. AICTE is very delighted that we are able to contribute in a small way, whatever you all people have been doing, and Ministry is also very much seized of the matter of how we bring in Indian knowledge system in the curriculum, in the activities that are happening in the campuses and so on. I hope my presentation is visible and I'm audible.
Absolutely, sir. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think this topic, which is given to me on Indian knowledge systems and its imperatives, I would like to deal with, and I had no time. Yesterday was the inauguration and this task was given to me. So I banked upon some of our friends in Indian Knowledge System Division of the Ministry, that is Dr. Ganti Murthy, as well as from the Universal Human Values Program, which we conduct. So I drew from all of them, and the slides are owing to all of those people. What they have done, I'm just presenting. So I give due credit to my companions in both AICTE, inside as well as outside. So many times this question always comes into our mind: what is this Indian knowledge system all about? And yesterday, many of them were saying we should not use the word Indian itself in the first place. So Bharatiya knowledge system or Bharatiya Jnana Parampara. But what is it all about? Where does it come from? And what are the imperatives of that? How to proceed? You know, this question must be coming to all the faculty who are attending the faculty development program before they joined in for this 19 days workshop. But yesterday, during the inaugural function itself, there must have been great clarity amongst the minds of all the faculty members as to why are we here and what are we going to do. And this is a very important and fundamental question which has to be answered. And we have to answer this because teachers, once they understand this, they have to take it forward and then convince their own students as well. And therefore, unless clarity is there in the minds of faculty members, it would not come to the students. Then, is there a way that what is called as Indian way of doing things? This is another way, or Bharatiya way of doing things. Is it worth studying what our ancestors did and think, or in a modern era, we have so many things which are happening. Are we not going back in history? Are we becoming archaic? This question also comes to the mind of many people. And then this tradition, this ancient culture, civilizational values, are they relevant today? Because they all started 10,000 years ago, and are they relevant in the modern times in the 21st century and beyond? And why is it important to you and your student? I think these are 4 or 5 inherent questions which anyone would want to understand first before going out. And therefore, there are some misgivings. To address those misgivings, this Mahakavi Kalidasa's Malavika Agni Mitram has this shloka, Purana Mityevana Sadhu Sarvam, Achapi Kavyam, Navamityavadyam, Santaha Parikshan Nyatarat Bhajante, Mudaha Parapratyayena Buddhihi. This is very, very interesting. The translation of that poem or the verse in English is that all poems are not good only because they are old. All poems are not bad because they are new. Good and wise people examine both and decide whether a poem is good or bad. And only a fool will be blindly led by what others say. So the essence of the Kalidasa's, this poem, is reflected in our Indian knowledge systems. Just because it is ancient, we will not accept everything as it is. And it may be not necessarily all of that to be good. Not that in the modern science and technology, whatever we have currently been learning from our curricula and syllabus need to be bad. There can be possibilities of both having certain elements which are not so good today and some of them to be very good today. And therefore, that discerning is very important. Only a fool can depend on someone else saying, but a wise man always will try to introspect, will try to look into inwards, outwards, a lot of discussion, debate, understanding, critical thinking, analytical, all of those things are applied. And at the end of that, whatever is convincing, we take it and we take it forward. You know, this is very, very fundamental and important. And therefore, many a times when people from various Macaulayan system of education, they come and say that the ancient one is all humbug and there's no strength in that. You have all what we said, the traditions are, whatever you are following have no meaning and so on and so forth. But we need to address them and we have to tell them squarely that there is value for everything in life and let us look at it very, very carefully. Now coming to the issue of sustainability and the way work is happening in the whole world today, there is a full circle. See, people criticized earlier Indian values, Indian systems, our traditions, but now the United Nations itself quite often meets and talks about sustainable development goals. You know, there are 17 of them. Education is one of them, but environment is there and education is there. How do we take care of equity? How do we have food for everyone? There's 17 of them, very, very important goals, which are called sustainable development goals. And from time to time, we come to realize the kind of pollution that we are facing, the kind of diseases that we are getting in. That means the whole world, the way it went forward from the 16th, 17th century onwards till now, is certainly looking at that is unsustainable. You know, we have temperature rise of the planet by 1.5 degrees, and it is said that if it crosses 2 degrees, it is irreversible. That means we will have no way to come back to the better way of the planetary life. And that's why it is very, very important to control the temperature to less than 1.5 and regain whatever lost in terms of environment, in terms of species, in terms of plants, in terms of the entire diversity, there is a challenge which is being addressed by the United Nations. And therefore, it often comes to our mind, it is becoming self-evident that the current model of development is unsustainable. And that's why there is a conflict which is visible every day in and out. And therefore, a thing will come in whether there is any alternative route and what is to be done. And governments as well as the scientists and educational institutions are all talking about new way of looking at the entire development which has taken place. In fact, the very fact that GDP and the development index, etc., these numbers are also under question by many people. And there is a new index which is coming in, which is called happiness index. With all of what is happening, are the people happy with all the development, modernity that has come in? And that's why the question of sustainability is often asked about. These rising inequalities are found in all variety of systems. People thought earlier that the capitalist system, where monopoly is there of the industry, will take care of all the problems of the nations, but it failed. Then similarly, socialist pattern, where distribution of wealth, communist governments all said that whatever is produced is to be just distributed amongst all and we should not worry. Then there was no work culture, ethics, and therefore that system also failed. So both versions having failed, the question of a new paradigm for development is talked about as a dire need. But many people have said that why are you trying to look at new system? There is already a system in existence. Why are we not adopting it? Maybe we have to reinvent some of the characteristics of that, may have to be tweaked a little bit, but that is an Indian way, Bharatiya way, which is both sustainable and which strives for welfare of all. When we say welfare of all, this welfare is not just of that of Homo sapiens, the human beings, but all animal world, all plant world, that means botanical, zoological systems. Not only that, including the environment and the nature, that means climate, all of that is taken care of under one umbrella, and that is the Indian way of looking at every aspect of it. And if we want to become the true knowledge power of this century and also be Vishwaguru, which is what new education policy which came in last year after 34 long years has been continuously talking about, that India has a role to play in the global arena, that is in terms of providing wealth of information that is hidden in our literature, in our system, and then make it relevant to today's requirements and needs and present it to the world. And that's how we can become truly Vishwaguru. And that is the imperative, that we understand our heritage and teach the world that Indian way of doing things is possible, and it has been observed, practiced for thousands of years, and we can, even now today, we can follow it, and we can certainly get back to that. Now, this is very interesting that if you look at any civilization long back, maybe 5,000 years ago, there were only two major things which used to happen. One is agriculture and the other is trade. There are two important foundations of any society. Before that, man was nomadic. He used to go hunting in the forest, whatever one person could get out of the tools that he had, either animals or the fruits or the vegetables which are already there in the nature, they were using it. But when man started settling down and civilization started growing, the two fundamental aspects are agriculture and trade. And agriculture, naturally, it has its own consequences of dependence on rainfall. How do you grow the crops and so on and so forth. And the trade is you make use of the agricultural produce to share with others in the form of a barter system, maybe in the earlier one when there were no currencies, and subsequently even currencies came into being. And we had trade which used to take place between places. And this one shows that amongst all the continents of the world, The agriculture was practiced much earlier than any other place in India, and that was sustainable agriculture, one which is environment friendly agriculture. And the sea routes through which there was a travel which was taking place from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth, both on the eastern side, on the western side, that was meant for trade. And therefore, huge shipping industry also existed. Large sized ships, they used to travel from Bharat to rest of the world. And then the trading used to take place, and many of these goods were collected from there also, and exchange used to take place. So these are two fundamental things which used to happen. But for agriculture, which is dated back to about 8000 BC, that means 10,000 years ago, the importance of rain and the weather was very important. How water is significantly necessary, as well as how weather will give us rains, was known to Indians 10,000 years ago. And that's why the simple shloka, which is there in Saptaha Brahmana Shukla Yajurveda, which says Agnairve Dhumo Jayate. That means fire creates vapors. That is how sea water gets evaporated. Dhumat Abramaha, these vapors will create clouds. You know what water vapor goes up, it forms clouds. Abrata Vrushti, and these clouds give rain, and this rain falls on our land. It gives water for the crops, and excess water will again go through the streams to rivers to finally the ocean, and again the cycle continues. You know, this cycle we study in our school book right from 2nd, 3rd standard as a knowledge which has been gained as though it was not known to the human beings earlier, but the slokas very clearly depict how important it is and how agriculture depends on this. And therefore, rainfall was considered a Purvachitti, prior wisdom in right from the Vedic times. And that is how the agriculture got evolved. Even the importance of drinking water in terms of sanitary system, in terms of water circulation systems, whether it is Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Lothal, all these civilizations had water as the most important basic element. That's why these civilizations came on the banks of the river on one side, and how water is to be stored, water harvesting is to be done, water purification is to be done. All of that was part of knowing about water and making use of water, not only for agriculture, but for all other purposes. Now, as far as the forecasting about when rain is likely to take place, or how much rain this year we are likely to get. Today we have weather forecasting software, and depending on the pressure in the upper atmosphere, there are a lot of intense calculations using supercomputers, and then finally it is declared that it is likely that in the next week there are going to be thunderstorms, there is going to be rainfall, and many times it is accurate. Sometimes we are off the mark by sometimes half a day, 1 day, or few hours, something like this. But our rishis like Kashyapa, Parashara, Gautama, and Vatsa, they are all well known for creating their own rainfall prediction methods. So it is not new that rainfall or weather forecasting is happening in the modern world, but there used to be similar predictions. We need to study them in detail and adopt them so that our calculations using modern scientific methods and those of the past, they can be mingled, corroborated, and we will have much better accuracy in terms of results of the prediction. So the prediction of maybe climate or the weather 6 to 7 months in advance. Even today, it is not possible to predict it so early. No. We normally do it 1 week in advance or fortnight in advance, and then 1 day in advance, few hours in advance. These are all fine. But some of the forecasts which can be done even more than 10 days earlier, up to 6 months, is not a matter of a joke, and which was possible long ago using the methods of, these are called traditional methods for understanding of the nature and intense observation. And many times people feel that these are all someone has given in writing and people are following it blindly. These are not blind faith. Unfortunately, people do not understand scientific thinking has also evolved from ourselves. That's why the first slide itself, we said whatever is acceptable, we accept it, others we reject it and move ahead. And therefore, all of these models which were developed were time tested. It's not one generation, but several generations must have evolved based on the experiments that were conducted. So it's highly experimental science. And that is what our civilization had followed its traditions. And we all know our culture and civilization is one of the oldest. There are very few civilizations in the world which are as old as this. And therefore, we have to be proud of our civilization. A civilization which has stood the test of time, and with all its interactions with other civilizations and their people, including cooperative and invasive. There were both varieties. We must understand the dynamics of that. And our civilization is the one which has always been a living civilization, a dynamic civilization. We never had any dogmas, dogma-less civilization. I think this is very important because other civilizations had their death. None of them continued. They had prospered, no doubt, to a great height and then collapsed. The reason being they were dogmatic. They did not change as per the changing times, whereas Indian culture, Indian civilization is still living, dynamic, though it may have been wounded by foreign invasions, as well as several internal disruptions, all variety of problems we are able to withstand. But the maximum damage happened between 17th to 20th century, subjugation from the invasions which had happened, both from the perspective of religion and the customs, as well as in terms of the foreign rule, the British Empire which was established. They spoilt our entire education system so that our new generation is not even aware of the glorious traditions of knowledge that we had developed over several hundreds and thousands of years. And that was subjugation which happened. And because of this subjugation of the Macaulay education system and its continuation, unfortunately, even after independence, this has created a generation which is left devoid of the knowledge of our own civilization. So most of us, including me in our times, in our school, we had hardly anything to talk about Bharatiya civilization in our textbooks. So very little we know is only from some senior people who gave us some stories, lessons, or once in a while we came across a book by reading that. Otherwise, formal education is devoid of all the ancient knowledge that existed, and it has been totally destroyed. And that's why our young generation many times question the authenticity of all of that, what is being talked about under Indian knowledge systems. And that is why this particular seminar or workshop is very, very significant and important. How do we reach out to those people, young generation, make them enthusiastic about our ancient past, make it relevant to today, and take it forward. So it is time we need to rejuvenate. There's no question about it. And luckily, happily, our new education policy has talked about Indian knowledge system in greater depth. And as a society, as a people, we have to take charge with responsibility. We can't say that, let the government do it. Government can't say that we cannot do, only you should do it. It is a collaborative effort. Both the government's role is in terms of facilitation, providing the possibilities of engaging, and the people, the universities, the colleges, the faculty members, they have to take charge with full responsibility. And unless we do that, there is no way out. And in some way, even before the policy, I'm very happy to announce that AICTE decided in one of our executive committee meetings that the nation's pride does not come without understanding our own knowledge system, our own ethos, our own values, our own science and technology which was developed, our own philosophy which was developed. Without knowing this, we cannot go any forward. And that is how this Indian knowledge system as a non-credit course was introduced. Because many times when we introduce something, there will be hue and cry as to why this has been put into. And in the beginning, all these 7-8 slides I was explaining the genesis of why it is necessary, why it is required. One is the whole world is today talking about environment, is talking about sustainability, and that can only emerge from out of Indian knowledge system. And that is one area. The second one is, many a times we often say that science has come from the West because Nobel Prizes are all awarded to people who have done excellent research in terms of physics or mathematics or medicine or chemistry and all that. And then we honor them, and one or two of them, once in a while when Indians get it, we get elated. But some of our people who did research even better than most of these Nobel laureates is unnoticed, not in the ancient era, but even in the modern era. This is the travesty of truth. But we thought that how can we make our people to be more passionate about Indian knowledge system is by introducing a course. But when you see few aspects of that, you get interested, then you start doing research, you start delving into that knowledge. You look for books, you look for literature, you look for wherever it is available, you will go. This is like creating the thirst. We all know that in the advertising world for products, huge hoardings and television ads will create need for that. Although you may not need them, but the kind of advertising that happens, you start feeling that you need it. And I think in Indian knowledge system, I'm using probably a wrong analogy, but it is necessary. So unless you get the taste of what is Indian knowledge system, the importance of that, how deep it is, how useful it is, I don't think our younger generation is ever going to learn Indian knowledge system. And all of that is embedded in the ancient languages like Sanskrit and Pali and Tamil and all that. So we are losing our languages also. All our education has been happening in English, and we read books which are in English. Even if some of the ancient texts are translated from Sanskrit into English, we go through those English books, but not the original text of Sanskrit. And that's why whatever translation has happened has its own limitations. Unless we start learning the language of Sanskrit or Tamil or Prakrit or Pali and then go into the literature and learn it, we are never going to learn it properly. And that is why this is very important to have Indian knowledge system also being part of the curriculum, along with provision for learning Sanskrit as one of the possible electives. We may not force. When you force, there is always a reaction. So AICT took a very cautious decision that we will say that this is a non-credit course. So when students will not have to, depend on the grade of that course to get the CGPA to be lifted or something like that, they will not have so much botheration. They have to only learn it. And when they are learning, if there are passionate teachers, like all of you who have joined this particular workshop for about 3 weeks duration, each one of them, when they understand the nuances and when they create interest amongst students, students will become researchers in this area. I think we have a long way to go, but the starting point is making a non-credit course available. So having made this single textbook was not available, and therefore, if a teacher who has to teach an Indian knowledge system course with 10 topics, and each topic requires 2 granthas or 2 study of Vedas and many others, our teachers will say that, sir, मेरा पहले के मैकेनिकल इंजीनियरिंग पढ़ाने का कोर्स है, सिविल इंजीनियरिंग का है या मैथमेटिक्स का है, केमिस्ट्री, उसके अलावा ये इतना सब मैं पढ़ के कहाँ से बताऊं, तो बहुत सारा चिंता का विषय हो रहा था. So then we found out a very inspiring person, Dr. Mahadevan, who is a professor of Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, who was also former founder, vice chancellor, and now back in IIM Bangalore, of course. He teaches a course on Bhagavad Gita and management. And the course is so popular, it is most chosen elective from amongst the students. So someone who has in-depth knowledge of entire Indian knowledge system, he is the right man, and he may also take help from others. But we said, you please give us a book on this particular topic. And he was very happy to do this, and this activity is ongoing. Very soon we will have Indian knowledge system book in our hands being released. And our course on Indian knowledge system then becomes very easy to be handled. Then you go to any country, everyone had their own ancient civilization and they all talk about reviving it. So is the case in the Indian system. Our eternal values, we may have to modify, transform, change, and depending on the newer developments, but we must continue. And again, repeating that our civilization has to be dynamic, and it was dynamic. Had it been stagnant, it would have had its own natural death. But very fact that despite all invasions, everything, it still continues to thrive. That means it is dynamic. The ability to question is always there. And that is how we have this onus or responsibility to understand, formulate, and give to the entire world the civilizational values. And that is the role which we have to play. And as I said, the best thoughts we have to receive from all sides. And that is why, even though our traditions are rich in the scientific knowledge, whatever new things have happened, we must adopt them. We must reinforce our values, do further research in that, and then take them to the new generation and proceed forward. This was all in the thought, much before the education policy. We have been talking about it last 70, 75 years, that India, its rich ancient past, and how do we go ahead. But concrete steps were never taken. People were working in silos in remote places in different institutions. And therefore, it was desired that a meeting should be called of all like-minded people. And the meeting was held on March 18, 2020. Unfortunately, pandemic started a little later, and our continuation of meetings did not happen. But that was a blended mode meeting. There were some on the platform who came through the Zoom. Others, they were all participating in physical form. And a lot of deliberation happened for about 5.5 hours, churning action, brainstorming, which led to that we must have a division of IKS. Like we have for languages, we have for different purposes, research. We must have a division of Indian knowledge system in the Ministry of Human Resource Development. Of course, the name has got changed to Ministry of Education from August 2020, but this decision was taken when it was still MHRD in the month of March. Then July 29, when new education policy also in unequivocal terms has said about IKS, division got created. And then this responsibility of shouldering the entire division of IKS was given to AICTE, and therefore in our office a division was set up. We announced posts of chief coordinator, coordinators, research fellows, and recruited based on an advertisement with a very clear mandate, vision, and the imperative which I was talking about in the beginning have to be realized only through vision and mission. And I'm reiterating some of the things, but it is for consolidation to promote interdisciplinary research on all aspects of Indian knowledge systems, preserve, disseminate for further research and societal applications. Very carefully worded. First thing is we must consider this as an interdisciplinary subject. There is a lot of overlap between different subjects. Therefore, it is an interdisciplinary subject in which research is necessary. Knowledge which already exists needs to be preserved. It has to be disseminated. New knowledge has to be created in this domain for betterment of the society or societal applications. And one strong thing which happened very recently is due to COVID. When the chips were down, we were in a position to develop new vaccine is in a medical field, but also using Ayurvedic systems, many of the people who got infected were protected. And so how the ancient knowledge is as relevant today as it was maybe 5,000 years ago is very important. Then the next important thing is set of mission statements. We started with creating a database of individuals and organizations who have contributed in research, teaching, publication, preservation, as well as both in contemporary rich Indian knowledge systems. And these subjects are from art, music, dance, drama, mathematics, astronomy, science, technology, life sciences, environment, natural sciences, healthcare, yoga, law, jurisprudence, economics, social sciences, psychology, philosophy, management, linguistics, oral traditions, knowledge hidden in various languages like Sanskrit, Prakrit, Tamil, Pali. I think almost everything that we talk about in higher education sector is covered here. And this is covered because all of this was part of our ancient education system, our knowledge system. And that's why all these subjects have come as natural phenomena, not forcefully. And to register on this particular portal where those who are interested can come and contribute and work, we have created a iksindia.org portal where continuously we will have information being disseminated. At the same time, new generation of people who are interested in the subject can be onboarded. They will be given a task. And this is all on a voluntary basis. This is what we have been interested in doing and we will continue to do. Many times, sometimes we receive the claims that there was an aeroplane and we used to fly from here to there. Without having validity, verification, nothing will be published on this website. This is one very fundamental thing. You know, in any journal, whenever you will submit a research paper, it is peer reviewed by 2 or 3 reviewers. When all the reviewers say that this is worth publishing, only then it is published. We are going to maintain the same sanctity that of a high quality research journal in terms of any information which is submitted to the IKS division of the ministry, that will be sent to 3 or 4 experts who will validate it and say that what has been stated here is correct. Only then we will publish it. And that is why very rigorous scientific investigation has to happen before you claim something. And that is what we are going to follow. We are also going to have a portal for archival purposes, dissemination of this knowledge. This portal is going to be useful. We will also have campaign for Indian knowledge system in different universities, asking them to adopt it, make it a part of the curriculum from primary education to higher education. So this is a policy direction which IKS division can do for universities and colleges and schools to include it in the curricula, promote further research, and therefore if someone wants to validate and therefore an expensive experiment is to be conducted, there will be funding support which this division will give it to the researchers who can then do the research, and findings can be published both in journals and on our platform website as well as in the wiki which we are going to create. And this is very important. And this is all which we face in day-to-day life. All of that, what we do, whether there is any application, each system of knowledge that existed, where and how it is useful for our living in terms of health, in terms of psychology, in terms of the nature, environment, sustainability has to be looked at. Then to identify scholars, some of them are hidden, they don't come out. So if you know any one of them, please share their information. We will contact them, we will get them on board. This is a very important area of identifying scholars because some of them may be in the late 70s and 80s. We do not know how many more years they will be here living with us. Maybe 20 years, maybe 15, 10 years. But we want to get everything that is there with them on the portal in terms of huge knowledge database. So there was a very clear-cut guideline which we assumed ourselves and set the timelines and started holding regular meetings to hold the IKS division, what is the progress that has happened, how much more we have to go, and create an impact on the entire, not only Indians, but the whole world. Which we always say that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the whole world is our family. So whatever we are going to achieve, we want to share with the entire world, and they also should get benefited from out of that. Then there should be possibility of research fellowships, they will be created. both visiting professors from Sanskrit universities to the normal universities of science, technology, and arts, and vice versa. So unless we do collaboration, both are lopsided. Because many times Sanskrit professors may understand the meaning, but they don't know technology, like in the previous webinar, which was happening just before this. Professor Kapil Kapurji was saying they did not know science, but still tried. But if we have science technology faculty also on board, along with the Sanskrit professors, I'm sure the meaning will be unearthed and the experiments conducted will give rise to validity of all that what is stated in those papers and those books. And that is why centers of excellence are needed to be established in not only central universities, IITs, IIMs, but also in Sanskrit universities. And they must have a mutually collaborating agreement of meeting together at regular intervals and decide on further area of research. And this is very, very important. I think modern disciplines also have to learn methodologies of our ancient system, and that's very important. Many times we always say that the newer methods are only, modern methods are only the ones which can have this scientific scrutiny, but scientific scrutiny comes from both the methodologies. Then different universities should have IKS cells. Ministry will try to support to the extent possible in interdisciplinary research, but PPP model of working with the institutions like maybe industry, maybe civil society, maybe NGOs is also a possibility which this IKS division is thinking about, and add value to anywhere, anyone, whatever are doing, we will try to create that. Now I'm shifting the gear, and this is the mandate given by the ministry to the IKS division, and which we will be carrying out. But certain nuances we'll have to understand, and that's why I'm putting a few more slides to see the depth of Indian knowledge system. So Indian knowledge system, or the traditions, they are very clearly categorized as two different entities. Some which are documented. We have a lot of books, granthas, which are written form. One can read them. There is a framework for reading, writing, understanding, and this is maintained in one set of knowledge base. The other knowledge base is a tradition. Probably these are not well documented, not written, but practiced for several centuries. But unless we get down into those traditions, find out what is being done, why is it being done, how it is done, we cannot probably convert it into the proper Indian knowledge system. And that's where the oral traditions and the culture which is followed in small places like villages, in tribal areas, needs to be documented first in terms of both video, audio, written, then start analyzing as research topics and convert it into a formal knowledge system. So normally what we say about Indian knowledge system and tradition in terms of the numbers broadly is converted into the different knowledge streams which are called Vidyasthanas, and skills and art forms which are called Kalas. There are 14 knowledge streams and 64 different forms of Kala or skills. And these are divulged through 4 Vedas. We all know Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samveda, Atharva Veda. 4 Upavedas, which are more practical oriented, Ayurveda, Dhanurveda, Gandharva Veda, and Sthapatya Veda. 6 Vedangas, Shiksha, Kalpa, Vyakarana, Jyotisha, Nirupta, and Chandas. And additional 4, making it to 18, the Upangas like Purana, Nyaya, Mimamsa, Dharma Shastra. So all of these are very, very important. And where well they taught and how did they continue for thousands of years? There was a very robust system of Gurukulas, and yesterday only we came to know that there were not earlier, even today, more than 10,000 Gurukulas which are prospering, which are existing. And they talk about hands-on experiential learning. There is a lot of theoretical knowledge given in the form of shlokas which you memorize, you try to understand, you try to apply, but more importantly, a lot of experimentation, experiential learning, which often we talk about today in the modern world, that theoretical knowledge is not good enough. We must have internship, we must have experiential knowledge. All of that was there in the Gurukula system. And there were 51 different methods of learning: audio, visual, by making to work projects, together working, collaborative learning, and all of these varieties of learning. And from Gurukula, it evolved into a formal university system in the 6th century BC in Takshila. The oldest of the universities of the world come from India. Of course, they are not living today, but Takshila University and Nalanda University between 6th century BC to 12th century, that means 1800 years, two things were significant. One is education. If it was there only in India and nowhere else. And anyone who wanted to be educated had to come from different parts of the world to India. This is number one. Number two, trade also used to go and take place during the same place. Therefore, for trading, they used to come to India, or our Indians used to go elsewhere. Therefore, our gross domestic product, which we define today often, was also of the highest order, more than 30%. And there were several other universities as well, which were teaching all these subjects in the form of a knowledge base. So I think I am again repeating here the different types of systems of knowledge that existed, which was the notion of knowledge: Vedas, Vedangas, Upangas, and Kalas, and 64 different types of art forms. And the skills, actually skills are very important. Now, skills, today also we talk about different types of skills. One we talk about is soft skills, the hard skills. We say technical skills, artisan skills. We say cognitive skills. We also say design skills. All these words have become very common and popular in the last 10, 15 years. Cognitive skills, design thinking, design skills, innovative thinking. But all of these were part of our different 64 kalas, technical skills and artisan skills, or cognitive and design skills. There were also visual and performing arts, or whether it is singing, nrutya, whether it is vadya, whether it is in terms of our performing arts. All of them had their own place in terms of kalas, and which added value to the normal education. Beauty and hospitality skills, where we always treated our guests as gods, and therefore beauty and hospitality go hand in hand. They were also having different types of skill sets, which were there part of the 64 skills. Miscellaneous skills, these were also codified. So all the types of skills which modern world today talks about were existing. So I'm just again listing them one by one. Vastu Vidya, Yantra Matrika, Takshana, Dhatuvada, means art of metallurgy, carpentry, mechanics, engineering. So who says that engineering is coming from the West? It all started here, including mineralogy. How do we mine and then make use of them, polish them, creating utensils of silver, the gold, different types of building of shrines, practicing medicine, medical plants being recognized and then made use of them in terms of both for healthcare, preventive as well as post diseases, art of applying, preparing for cleaning your not only teeth, clothes, painting the body, you name it, and all those activities existed in the form of 64 different variety of arts. So I'm not going to go through each one of them. This is listed and anyone can make use of them at any point in time as and when they're required. Otherwise, it's almost 1 hour is getting over, so I don't want to go into each one of them in detail. So these are 64 kalas which are very, very important. Then comes darshanas, yoga, vaisheshika, then Purva Mimamsa, Uttar Mimamsa in Vedanta. And I'm not repeating, Vedas are there. But more important subjects which are covered. I talked about agriculture in the beginning, which is also related with hydrology, water. But there are yagnas and offerings. There is a reason behind that. That also has to be looked at. Sociological subject, cosmology. and philosophy. All of these are part of the Vedas. In Upavedas, these four are the most prominent ones. Ayurveda for medicine and life sciences, Sthapatya Veda for architecture and engineering and all our temple architecture or the townships which were developed were all part of this. Dhanurveda deals with the armory, archery, weaponry, etc., which is for modern day warfare. Then Gandharva Veda, which deals with fine arts, music, dance. So these are all subjects which are available for several thousands of years. But how do we make them relevant to today is the question which Indian Knowledge System Division today is talking about constantly, and we would like to bring it to the fore. Now I will come to slightly to a different field now, to mathematics, and how it is related with both the Sanskrit as a subject, grammar, as well as in terms of the new computer skills or cyber security. These are all very important codification which is important. One is Bhut Samkhya, Aryabhatta's method, and Katapai, this system of using numbers in words. And this is like coding. We have I up to O, Amaha, then Ka, Kha, Ga, Ya, Cha, Cha, Ja, in all Indian languages. What is there in Sanskrit is a replica of that. The script may be different, but we have all these words. These are used in the form of what we call formulae in order to depict a particular number. There is a column and a row, you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 9 and 0. And in the Katpayadi system, the letters K, Kha, Ga, Gha, Ya, they are all written under 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then Cha, Cha, Ja, Ja, Ya at 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Then similarly, Ta, Ta, Da, Da, Na, Ta, Ta, Da, Da, Na. Then Pa, Pa, Ba, Ba, Ma, Yara, La, Va, Sha, Sha, Sa, Ha, La. And then our A, E, E, U, etc., which is 0 value. I think this is a very interesting chart which is given. And a simple example which is depicted here will show how a number was coded in terms of the shloka or the words. For example, Va in this table is at a column number 4, and therefore Va stands for 4 numbers. Cha stands for, it is in the 6th column, and therefore it is having a value of 6. Therefore, Vacha, it is not 46, but it was reversed. Vacha, it becomes 64. It is not 46. In a reverse order. Whereas, if you take a word like Vacha Mi, Va stands again for 4, Cha is 6, and Mi is having, Mi has Ma and E, and this is Mi which stands for the number 5. And if you look at the 3 things together, Vacha Mi, you reverse the order, it becomes the number 564. So this was one methodology of codifying. Whereas Aryabhatta's system had just the other way around. Ka, Kha, Ga, Gha, Ya was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is fine. But if you look at Va and Cha, Va stands for, now look at the entire table, Va stands for 60 here. And Cha stands for 6. The Vacha is 60 plus 6 becomes 66. And the Vacha Mi stands for 60 plus 6 plus 25 into 10 raised to 2. That Mi has Ma and E. So E is 10 raised to 2 and M is Ma is 25. And therefore it is 25 into 10 raised to 2, which becomes 2,500. And added to that 60 and 6 will become 2,566. So the same word here, Vacha Mi was 564 and it becomes here 2,566. 2 different ways of how you codify the number system using the letters, alphabets. Similarly, in the music system, the Sa Re Ga Ma Pa Da Ni Sa is again coded in terms of the combination of the values which are used here. and ragas come out of this, swaras come out of this. And the complicated figure, I have not able to understand this still, a system in Carnatic music. You can see how much detailed analysis must have been done about each and every small raga or shloka, whatever is coming out, has to be made use of. And I'm just given sample of, one is agriculture, one is mathematics, but we are all aware of the contribution that was made by Kannada in physics, Nagarjuna in chemistry, Aryabhatta, Bhaskara, Brahmagupta, Ramanujan, as late as last century itself in mathematics, civil and construction technology, mechanical engineering, material science, weather forecasting, I referred earlier, water harvesting, architecture, all of these subjects, and it goes on. So at this juncture, being part of the Indian knowledge system, which has been established by the ministry in AICTE, the challenge before us is, this is an opportunity. The opportunity for going back to the roots, understanding, studying, developing ancient Indian wisdom to be recapitulated and bring it into the new education system. That is what the policy talks about. So everyone and anyone who is interested must now come forward. This is the time. This is the opportune time. If you miss the bus, we will miss it permanently, because those knowledgeable people who can guide us are very limited in number, and they are also, many of them, above 50, 60, 70 age. They may be with us for next 10, 20 years. And therefore, if we are not able to extract all of that and codify it and bring it into the knowledge system, make it a part of the curriculum, make it a part of the, our school system of not only education and examination, and promote it, we are going to lose it. In 12th century AD, when the Nalanda library was burnt, which was an 8-story building, it is said that lakhs of documents were there. They all are lost. Now, whatever are remaining in scattered places, unless we bring them back in one place, and today, fortunately, it need not be stored in a physical form. If we have got that, we can scan it, we can convert it into the digital material and can store it on our servers. And it is easily accessible. That is another advantage of the modern technology. Earlier, it has to be in one place. You have to go and read that grantha or the book. Today, you don't have to store it in a physical library. It is possible to be stored on a cloud computing environment. Anyone, anywhere in the world can access it, read it, understand it, continue further research on that. So let us make use of it. This is what is the new way of looking at the old knowledge system into a new knowledge system, and continue this research for the betterment of the entire world, a peaceful, happy place to live in, not just for Homo sapiens, but all forms of the living material, that is living animals, plants, and the Mother Earth itself. So my appeal is all of you should join and contribute by clicking on https://iksindia.org. You can become a member. You give your name, address, in which area you are interested. If you have already done some work, please share it with us, and we will make it available to the whole world, because we believe in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and Sarve Janaha Sukhino Bhavantu. So let us make the whole world happy place, peaceful place to live in, and let us leave this planet in a better shape than what we received from our immediate earlier generation. That's all I wanted to say. And if there are suggestions, if there are ideas, if there are any other comments or any questions, I have limited knowledge. We unfortunately did not have so much elaborate learning of all of these subjects. Today, at least, the government is keen. There are many knowledgeable people who are keen. So let us make it as a big movement, Indian knowledge system movement, and move ahead and create a world which we are all envisaging to be created. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sahasrabuddhe. That was extremely insightful for us and for all our participants here and those who are watching via the live stream. We could enable the chats, and I'm sure we have a lot of questions, Dr. Sahasrabuddhe. If we can take it for the next 30 minutes or so. Or we could also request the participants to unmute their mic, and we could have one participant ask their question, and the participants could be spotlighted. Bhumika ji says very informative session, and there is a question that I see here. Dear Professor Anil, how do you see the role of transdisciplinary approach in making India's knowledge systems an integral part of education systems, and how the upcoming bachelor's in liberal arts and sciences program be designed?
No, I think
to make this endeavor a more sustainable one, and this is being asked by Dr. Rajiv. We could spotlight Dr. Rajiv and Dr. Sahasrabuddhe together. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, Rajiv ji, dhanyawad. This is a very important question. The new education policy also talks about multidisciplinary and transdisciplinary research universities, and therefore this is absolutely in line with that, and therefore there is nothing wrong in continuing to address this issue from two different angles. Number one, how in a university which is supposed to be universal, the word university also has universal. So all variety of subjects and courses must be available for a student to learn. There should be no hesitation in saying that you are a student of arts college, therefore you cannot learn computer programming is not correct. So therefore, there is always multidisciplinary approach to every subject, every knowledge base, every knowledge system. And therefore, transdisciplinary is the order of the day. And it was followed in the ancient times. Nothing was seen in isolation. Unfortunately, we started segregating in terms of going deeper into the subject. We started specializing. Specializing was necessary. I'm not saying that specializations are wrong, but in the hurry for getting into specializations, we forgot that the knowledge is continuum. It is a continuum. There is no hard-walled boundary between this knowledge and that knowledge. And therefore, whether it is music or mathematics or music and computer science, both are having complementary nature. And unless we understand that, we will not be able to proceed forward. And therefore, while revising the curricula of the universities, it is the onus of the university senate, syndicate, or professors who deal with that to give as much explanation as possible in terms of how they are connected. No, we lose our connections. In fact, forget about different subjects. Within the subject also, I have found many of the textbooks, many of the courses, we start as though they are completely different from each other. Each body of knowledge is connected with the other body of knowledge, and how this connection is there has to be told in the first chapter, in the first class of that topic. Only then students will get excited. And I have observed in KSA, again, I'm coming to mathematics example. Many students distaste mathematics because they feel it has no value in life unless you make it connected. Or even for that matter, some students are not interested in history. They think, what is the use of history? It's not going to have any purpose. So unless you connect the subject with how it is attached with the day-to-day life, where it is useful, how it is useful, students will not get interested into that. And therefore, the curriculum revision must be in such a manner that even if you are giving a degree in one domain, there must be core courses of one discipline. There must be few further electives in that domain. There must be open electives, which we call as across the board. You know, as I gave example, a mathematics student can learn psychology, or a student of history can learn computer programming. I think these are completely poles apart outwardly, but inwardly there can be enough connection between them. And if you create that connection, students will understand it better, and it also serves their interest. The most important thing in our country is students are admitted into a particular program, not out of the attributes that a student has, not because of the attitude of the student, not because of the quality of inner, whatever you say, quality that student has, but because parents and friends and relatives will say you have to become this, and he lands up there. And having landed in that particular program, if that student is actually not so much interested in that domain, he will be underperforming. Whereas if there is a broader multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary approach provided, and whatever is the subject interest of that student, if you match it with wherever he is unfortunately thrust into, and you make a marriage between the two, he will get excited. Then whatever I know or why I want to know is also connected with the subject which I am studying. And that is very, very significant and important. So Rajiv ji, as an academician, we have this big responsibility of supporting our students, mentoring our students. So everyone has excellence in them. Everyone has been born with some qualities. And unless as a teacher, we identify them, we support them, we mentor them, we advise them, we guide them as a friend, philosopher and guide, we cannot bring it out and make it shine. And that is why the entire curriculum revision, or how do we deal with it, there is a big role that a teacher has to play, and therefore teacher education is important. Therefore, this particular program of Indian Knowledge System for faculty development is important. When we know everything is transdisciplinary, we should be able to propose it to our students, our Senate, and get it going.
Thank you, Dr. Anil. There's a very interesting question by Dr. Ajay G. Namdev. He says, is there any institute which teaches about soul or Atman?
I think there are universities who have been doing a lot of courses on philosophical learnings. And there are also organizations like Richa ji, आप जानते हैं, श्री रविशंकर जी है, या और भी बहुत सारे ऐसे हैं. They have their own universities also, as well as outside the university also one can go and really understand not only soul, mind, Atman, and how do we go beyond that. These are all things which you can also learn in university system, but even outside the university system. But every university may not have such courses, but there must be courses. And I'm very happy that AICTE started 3 years ago what is known as Student Induction Program and Universal Human Values Program. 3 weeks of student induction program, no curriculum, formal curriculum, but everything on the earth about right up to soul is included in a small manner, in that. So you start with meditation, you start with self-introspection, you start self-reflection, and you realize your Atman, your soul, yourself. No one can lead you there. You have to start continuous introspection of your own personality, and you will get your soul.
Dr. Rajat K. Pradhan, maybe we could just spotlight him. Dr. Rajat, would you like to ask your own question? Dr. Rajat, please unmute your mic. And I see Dr. Pankaj Gupta also has a question. Whoever can unmute your mic first can please start, because that's in the best interest of time. Yes. I would request you to keep your questions very brief and direct so that.
Yes, madam. Yes. Thank you, madam. I have one question. I work particularly in a little more aggressive way, that we can use our knowledge systems to take science forward, to give them some new light as to in what way, let's say, physics or biology needs to move forward. That's what I and my collaborator, Dr. Tripathi, we are interested in working in this way. It's not that just we are to prove that ours was there, or we had a system of knowledge and that this is justified. It's not just that. It's a little more aggressive. That having our base fully set, we can guide we can guide modern sciences. So my question is, in what way RSPL or any other such institute or organization which is there, in what way they can help us take forward our this kind of aspiration, this kind of goal?
Whether it is Rashram or any one of our organizations who are very passionate about it, we have to develop very robust, a sort of a structured curriculum. Many times what happens is when we speak in randomness on different subjects, maybe people who are interested in a particular domain, we are not able to cater to them. So there is a possibility that we can create what are known as Swayam courses, MOOC courses, which I talked about. Massive online open courses, which are there, in which you can have in every subject, whatever ancient knowledge was there, you state it, including the original reference, not just hypothetical one, but what existed earlier. What is its meaning? What is its application then and now and tomorrow? And if such a course is created on physics, metaphysics, chemistry, mathematics, biology, which are all sciences, but also on different arts in terms of history, in terms of psychology, in terms of political science, in terms of economics, each one of these were dealt with in our ancient knowledge. And there can be more than 100 such courses which are possible. I give an example of our Indian knowledge system curriculum where there are 10 subtopics. So Dr. Mahadevan is writing a book on it. Each one of those chapters can have 10 sub-chapters, and each one can get converted into one full book or one full course of 3 credit duration. And if there are some 100 to 200 passionate people in each one of these subjects, we can pool our resources together and can create a MOOC course, which will not only be helpful for Indians to be knowledgeable about it, but the whole world will get benefit. Today, yoga is being practiced all over the world. 150, 60 countries follow the yoga because they found the utilization out of that. Same way, why not our practices of traditions which are environment friendly can be made popular? Like yoga, we have that notion of taking care of plants, growing certain types of plants which will give us oxygen, which are medicinal. So if we are able to spread this to the whole world, world will get benefited. Not only us, Indians will certainly get benefited, but the whole world. You are right, actually, and therefore all passionate people. That's why I'm appealing repeatedly that under iksindia.org portal, please register yourself. All like-minded people with like-minded subject interest, we can have a smaller group meetings and can create a course which will be helpful for the whole world.
We have a question from Dr. Bhumika ji. I am trying to invite who have not spoken in the earlier session so that everybody gets a chance somewhere. Yes, Dr. Bhumika, maybe you could unmute your mic and we could also spotlight. Please ask.
Namaste, madam. Am I audible, madam?
Yes, you are.
Okay. मुझे just share करना है. I don't have any question. अभी एक participant ने question पूछा था कि is there any university or institute who is teaching about the soul? So I am from Army University, Rajkot, from Gujarat, and from 2014, faculties and students are trained by different resource persons like Somdev Tyagi regarding the human values. 8 days workshop we are carried out for all the faculties and students, and we have in our university we have separate cell of VECD cell, that is Value Education for Consciousness Development, and we are in our routine teaching schedule. Students are means faculties are teaching these human values in the direction of consciousness development. So as a teacher, I have 20 years of experience, but when I come to know about this human values, means teach everything in the light of human values, then it is very much giving the happiness. when you are studying, you are teaching the subject. पहले जब सब्जेक्ट सिखाते थे तो इसे मतलब इंफॉर्मेशन देने के लिए सिखाते थे, लेकिन अब जब सब्जेक्ट सिखाते हैं तो वो सोसाइटी के बेटरमेंट के लिए या फिर इनर हैप्पीनेस देने के लिए इस तरह से सब्जेक्ट सिखा सकते हैं वो अब पता चले. So this is just my sharing, and the students want to understand the entire universe, and it is the meaning of university that it is the place where entire universe can be understood by the students. It is the real meaning of university. So not only the technical subjects, but the all and every type of subjects, which are the different areas which are included in the IKS, everything must be teach to the students. Then and then it is the real, fulfillment of the name of university. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Bhumika ji. You are absolutely right. Our Universal Human Values Student Induction Program, where faculty are trained for 8 days. We have been continuously doing it even during pandemic. For more than 50,000 faculty are already trained in this. And you are our brand ambassadors in taking it to the students.
Yes.
Dr. Pankaj Gupta, you could unmute your mic. I see Dr. Anuradha Chaudhary also here. She could also take up some questions. She's a co-curator of this program, and she's been the pillar behind FTP 2020 and 21. She's a faculty at IIT Kharagpur, and she's also the coordinator at the IKS division of MOE at AICTE. So I would request Dr. Chaudhary also to intervene and take up a few questions. Yes. Yes, Dr. Pankaj Gupta ji.
Okay, Risha ji, namaskar. Anil sir, namaskar. Really great to hear from you, and also very, very practical and a very passionate approach for handling the Indian knowledge system. And I remember, sir, that when you started this system for integrating the ethics in the management curriculum, that was also like a great innovation, and where you created a subcommittee where Dr. Mathri, Bhimrai Mathri, who is now director of IIM Nagpur. So I also contributed a little bit at that time. So I just wanted to share one thing to you, sir, that in my earlier stint with Jindal, and then I became Vice Chancellor of University, and then again I'm back in Jindal, and I'm having this Center for Ethics, Spirituality and Mindfulness over here. So when I was teaching my courses last time, like the self-awareness and mindful leadership, Bhagavad Gita, ancient wisdom, then there were not many takers. But now I see a lot of interest there. Like, my courses are now gaining a lot of popularity. Before COVID, I was also taking my students to a trip in the Himalayas. So those students, over a period of time, they have told to their juniors that how meditation, mindfulness are helping them in going in the right direction with a restful mind. So now I need not to do marketing for my courses, and I see that there is a much more acceptance over there. And sir, when I teach, then we try to do not of a preaching kind of a thing. And we relate concept of ancient wisdom, like in Bhagavad Gita, we talk about action without frustration. Then we talk about how to understand motives, how Krishna understood the motive of Arjuna, and then how he used the active listening to really understand from where Arjuna, what he wanted, and how to change motives. So we created those modules. So sir, my one suggestion is that, the people who should be also a little bit of realized, they should be internalize the whole thing. Then only they can be a very good brand ambassador for Indian knowledge system. So I think there is a need for a lot of, creating a core group, as you are already sharing, and training the faculty. Otherwise, sir, it will also become like a course which will not have a soul over there. So I just thought to share this. And also you have already mentioned that you plan to have some fellowship and some people you want to relate in the network. So my heartiest compliments to you. And sir, if you can do something for the teacher development in this area, that can be very meaningful. My heartiest thanks and namaskar.
Thank you, Professor Pankaj Gupta ji. This is the need of the hour, and it is our responsibility, as well as those who are interested may have to give up 1 year of their life for this purpose. Those who can take sabbatical leave from their professions and who are passionate can create set of teachers who will become intern passionate, and that's how एक दिए से दूसरा दिया जलाते जाएंगे तो पूरे दुनिया में हम जागृति निर्माण कर सकते हैं। वैसे ही ये कार्य है, इसमें आप भी योगदान कीजिए, हम भी योगदान।
Thank you.
Anybody else? I see Dr. Ashutosh Dandekar ji. You could ask your question, please.
Yes, madam. Sir, am I audible?
Yes.
So I am from Vasant Dada Engineering College, Budgaon, Sangli. So we have already started some ICAS related initiatives in our college, and particularly metallurgy and related experiments. We have also registered on that website, ICAS related website, and from this year we are allotting the final year projects related to Indian knowledge system in the stream of mechanical engineering and metallurgy. So your that particular motivation for that ITS and related activities is very good, especially AICT and that other contributors. They have conducted some webinars also in the month of May. I have attended that webinar. Our college have also conducted the webinar from the experts in that particular field. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. देखिए आप डॉक्टर ऋचा चोपड़ा जी है या डॉक्टर अनुराधा IIT खड़गपुर से है, डॉक्टर घंटी मूर्ति जी है, ये सब लोग अपने अपने काम से बाहर निकल के थोड़ा और ज्यादा डबल काम, ट्रिपल काम करते हुए जो आगे बढ़ा रहे हैं, इसी से हम पूरे दुनिया को छा जाएंगे, ऐसे मुझे लगता है।
Yes. Anybody else? Anybody may want to ask any question? Dr. Sanjeev Kakkarji, yes. Please, you could unmute yourself.
I have. So I've been to schools across India, colleges, medical colleges, even overseas, and I have not found a lot of institutional interest in new ways of thinking. So, that has to also be looked at. There has to be some, training for heads of institutions. And I give a simple example. Now we are so sensitized to drug abuse. And if you talk to a random set of school, college principals all over the country, that can we do some kind of drug prevention program? Mostly there's no interest because institutions are caught up with just completing the syllabus. And, unless we bring some changes at that level, we are doing a lot of battling just to make an entry. So, how is there some plan, like a refresher course for principals of schools, principals of colleges?
Sanjeev ji, we have got what is known as leadership development programs, and they are very, very important. There are some conducted by IITs, IIMs, and institutions like central universities, whom ministry gives funding, and it is of 3 weeks duration. It's not short. It is a full-time, face-to-face. It's not online. 2 weeks in an institution which has been conducting this program in India, in that institution. And 1 week they are even taken abroad at the cost of the ministry to showcase to them one of the top universities with which that particular institution has some arrangement, MOU. So you get a flavor of what you said rightly, the new ways of looking at it, innovation, and what is needed, how we handle students. And we talk about our examination system. We have another program called Examination Reforms Program. I think that's very important. Our all examination question papers from our KG to PG You take any university examination, they are all based on rote learning or memory-based questions. I'm not say against memory. Memory is also important because God has given us a gift of a storing capacity in our brains, and more you use, more it will be storing. You know, that's what is said. You know, the brain creates more and more constabulations and then increases the memory size, and therefore we should have something on the memory also. Not that everything is empty in the head, but the main problem is the questions are of such a nature we only can reproduce by memorizing without understanding. The real problem lies in not even understanding that. And that reproduction has no meaning because you are not able to use it anywhere. And therefore, how do you really understand in-depth knowledge, analysis of that, critical thinking, analytical ability, innovativeness, creativity? All of this should be part of the question paper. If that is started, then naturally our leadership also will boom from out of that. No, they are ultimately coming from the same system. And so 3 weeks program is one part. The other part is faculty development program through 1 week, like what we are holding now, 3 weeks program or sometimes 1 week program is important. And it is not just for principals, but it is at different levels. You know, our HODs, our deans, our principals, vice chancellors, directors, and wherever private universities or private colleges are there, their trustees and members of the society who actually handle this program or the college or the university, where they are also the important stakeholders. If they are not on board, they will not allow the principal to function. So you absolutely nailed, you know, that it is the leadership which has to be trained. And if they change, changing gradually downwards is much easier. And many of them at that age are ready, receptive. It is only we are not providing that opportunity. This is my observation. Teachers are, or the leaders or the principals and vice chancellor, we are not providing that opportunity for students to introspect, to understand, and then move away or keep away from drugs and abuses.
There are a lot of comments. Dr. Sanjeev, your mic is muted. And we have one last question if we could take.
Fine.
Yes,
Very briefly, Dr. Richa told me some time ago, I heard her talking, that the Sri Sri University in Orissa is a drug-free, alcohol-free campus. So we have role models, but you know, as you're saying, how to share them. That's it. Thank you.
Sanjeev, one very important thing what we need to do is, many times what happens in a program like this, we may say 100 things, but people won't believe. You rightly said that if Sri Sri Ravi Shankar University in Bhubaneswar has followed it, we must hold a program, face-to-face live program in that campus and make the principals and management to move around and test for themselves. It is not theoretical, it is practically implemented. When you see that, you will start following it. And that is why role models are very important, you know, even amongst teachers. A teacher will give a long lecture, but unless he or she is found to be following what he or she preaches, students will not respect you and will not follow you. And if you are a very simple man, doesn't matter your language capabilities, but your heart is clean and clear and what you say is what you are following, students will gravitate towards you. This is what it is.
That's beautifully said. I was thinking about this point just some time back. I had a conversation with one of my colleagues about how even a deficiency of the articulation, but a clean heart can really inspire so much. We have one question from Dr. Mansi. Perhaps that could be the last. If Dr. Anil Sahasrabuddhe, that is okay with you. Dr. Mansi, you can ask a question, please.
Good evening, everyone.
Mansi ji, we don't see you. We only see a blank screen since morning. I don't know why, but we are not seeing you. But yes, please post your question. Please ask your question.
Good evening, Anil sir. Good evening, Richa ma'am. Sir, I'm Dr. Mansi Chaudhary from Department of Chemistry, Rajdhani College, University of Delhi. Sir, my question goes to a very basic level. I have seen these days that many people are teaching Vedic mathematics, out of school. They to the children who are like 7, 8, 9, 10 years of age. When this knowledge is so important, why isn't it a part of the school curriculum? Why do we teach 1 + 1 is 2 always? Why isn't there a method of inculcating Vedic mathematics to the school level, which I think is more important as compared to others? And since this is the part of our basic Indian knowledge system, so why is this so?
Madam, unfortunately, I'd said for 75 long years, even after independence, we have not changed the curriculum in the manner that we had to do or we should have done it. And finally, as we often say, better late than never. We have risen now from the great slumber of 75 years. And in fact, it is about 165 years since the Macaulayan system came in. We have been put into deep slumber by some kind of an injection, and probably we are waking up now. And this wake-up call is very important. You rightly pointed out. Now the new syllabus, which is going to come from the school education or in the higher education, but you see sometimes there are voices of people who oppose this also. Unfortunately, they don't realize. In fact, I feel pity about them that they have not realized the value and strength of this.
Yes.
And that is because, again, they are in this slumber because of the British colonial education system. So unless we wake up ourselves, try to wake up others, we will not be able to solve this problem. So you are absolutely right, and it is happening. Let us do it as fast as possible. And no one can stop you from teaching something extra till it comes in the curriculum. Let us teach it as an extra course, doesn't matter. No, we should not worry about it. But meanwhile, all universities are asked to implement this, and hopefully very soon we will have all of this.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
So we come to the end of day 1, and with this beautiful session, Dr. Sahasrabudhe, thank you for again inspiring us, enlightening us, and really motivating us. I'm sure with 1 it becomes 2, with 2 it becomes 4, and with 4 it becomes 8, and this is how everything that we do or we don't do is certainly going to make a difference to someone somewhere, is my deepest conviction. Thank you so much, Dr. Sahasrabudhe, for your time, and I'm sure it would have been a very beautiful session, very learning, very eye-opening for each one of us. And whatever comments we receive, we will collate it. If we receive more questions, we will collate that, and we will be sharing it to all our speakers so that at their time, they could revert back to us on an email if their time allows.
Yeah, namaskar.
And Dr.
Sabhi ko pranam, namaskar.